And welcome everybody. It's Tuesday night. It is Crazy Chris's Rants. We've got quite a bit to cover. We're going to try to get through it as quick as possible because we've got quite a bit. On Impact results for wrestling, there was really nothing that happened. Nothing of any major importance. AEW had results of Hangman Page and Kenny Omega actually beat SCU for the tag titles, so Omega and Page are the new champions. Jon Moxley defeated Pac for the number one contender of heavyweight title. For those of you who might not know who Moxley or Pac is, Moxley is Dean Ambrose from WWE, and Pac is he was a person that was in NXT and a little bit of I think either Raw or SmackDown. He was known as Neville. So there was that. On NXT results, Imperium interfered and gives the Grizzled Young Veterans the win over the Undisputed Era in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. Dunn and Riddle defeated Imperium, but without, that was Pete Dunne and Matt Riddle defeated Imperium without any help from the Undisputed Era. Even with the interference from the Undisputed Era, Keith Lee wins the North American Championship, which is a good thing, and figured that this was going to be something that they were not going to allow him to have because they were going to push the Undisputed Era. They did not do that in this instance. Imperium and the Undisputed Era brawled at the end of the show. Like to see where this is going to go. It's two four-man factions. Imperium, I think one of them may have suffered a little bit of an injury there toward the end of the show. We'll have to see how that works out as it goes forward. It would be a nice little rivalry, but of course, if there's an injury, it will derail it. So we'll have to keep up with that and see how that ends up. Another thing we want to talk on is the Kansas and Kansas State brawl that happened earlier, I think during the week. Kansas and Kansas State got into a fight. What it was is Kansas State was losing the game by a large margin. Ended up, their coach had told them to let Kansas run out the clock so that the game would end. And the gentleman was dribbling the ball. One of the Kansas State players stole the ball, went to go shoot a layup, and he was blocked. He was blocked by the same player he stole it from, which says a lot about the player that got the ball stolen from him. He's actually fast enough to get back and block a shot. He was standing over the Kansas State player and was using some language that probably was not very good. A brawl erupted from both sides of the court, and a couple people from, I think, each team got suspended. One gentleman that you'll hear me talk about a little bit later, I'll go ahead and talk about him anyway. His name is, I guess you pronounce it, Silvio De Sousa. He got banned for 12 games for his part in the brawl. He was he was the player that he picked up a stool and was going to, I guess, hit somebody with it, and one of the coaches for their team took the stool away from him before he was able to do so, and he got a 12-game suspension for his role in that. A couple other players got maybe a 1 to 3 game suspension, so it kind of interesting on how that happens, and it's not something that you want to see happen. I mean, you want to see competitiveness and sportsmanship and things of that nature. You don't want to see major brawls. I know people like to sometimes people like to see fights and things, but there's a time and a place for everything. That's really not the time nor the place for that. I mean, Kansas had more to lose than Kansas State because Kansas is highly ranked and a pretty good team, and Kansas State one of the lower teams, and Kansas has to go without a few players, And Kansas State will have to go without a few players, but it doesn't really mean anything to Kansas State because they're already where they're at, and Kansas is, they'll have some tough teams maybe coming up, and those players may or may not make a difference. So you have to see how that goes. You hate really to see anybody get injured or anything like that really happen, but competitiveness sometimes does get the better of people. So there's that. Eli Manning is retiring from the New York Giants. Eli Manning, of course, the brother of Peyton Manning. So now both Mannings are retired from football. Eli won a couple Super Bowls there in New York. Pretty good career this last year, though. I'm thinking he was. I don't think he was at 100%. Even when he did play, I don't think he was at 100%. And it's kind of unfortunate to end your career on that type of note, but it does happen sometimes. We've seen it before, and it does happen. People don't go out the way they want to, and a lot of them don't. And he will be remembered as one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Not maybe as famous as Peyton, but certainly up there with some of the other ones. So also Gary Kubiak is to be named. He was named Minnesota's offensive coordinator, and Antonio Brown is in the news again. He's charged with burglary and battery. He turned himself in, and then he ended up, they put him on home confinement, and then they freed him from house arrest, but he still has to report to personnel, which would be somebody that would be court appointed. So he still has to report to them, but he's not on house arrest and he's not under arrest or anything of that nature. So we'll see what happens when he's out and about. I know he still has to report to personnel, but I don't know that that's really going to make a difference on anything. The Raiders are now going to be in Las Vegas. This will be different from what me and a lot of other people remember. A lot of us remember the Raiders being in Oakland or in Los Angeles. They're now moving to Las Vegas in a move that was a long time rumored, and sooner or later, here it goes. So we'll see what happens when they move to Las Vegas, and we'll see what happens there. Jay Gruden is the new offensive coordinator for the Jaguars. He was the head coach of the Redskins that got fired, so we'll see what he can do in Jacksonville. SmackDown results, there really wasn't anything interesting there to speak of. Eric Spoelstra, who's the head coach of the Heat, he spoke out the other day on Jimmy Butler not being in the All-Star game, not being named as an All-Star. In my personal opinion, what I've seen of Jimmy Butler, he doesn't really deserve to be an All-Star, and most of these ballots are filled out by fans. So if you want the fans to vote you into the All-Star game, you need to be worthy of that All-Star title. And from what I see from Butler most of the time, I don't see anything there that strikes me as an All-Star. He doesn't strike me as an All-Star. And Spoelstra as a coach, I've never really. He had a couple of championship teams, but only because he had LeBron James and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. I mean, how can you not win with those three guys on your team and win a couple of championships? You're a no-name coach that you didn't even have to coach the team. They could just win on their own anyway, and you didn't need to coach them. He was just there just to be the coach. And to tell you the truth, yeah, the Heat have a pretty decent record right now, but it's nothing spectacular. And most of the teams that the Heat play down there, in their division are not that good. Most of them stay under 500, and they're not really that good. So, and plus the East is kind of, if you look around the league, the East is not really the class this year. But there's only a couple teams in the East and in the West that are good. I mean, most of the teams are not really that good this year. So, we'll see how that works out. But, I just don't see the All-Star nod. The women's Canadian team beat the United States in the exhibition in hockey at the All-Star game. The Canadians won 2-1. That's something I'd like to see a little bit more of. The skills competition, I didn't really pay attention too much to it. I think the hardest shot was somewhere between 105 to 106 miles per hour. You imagine getting hit with that? That would hurt. I've gotten hit with a puck in the head a couple of times, and it's not. And that's from somebody that's not a professional, and it hurts. I can tell you right now, it hurts. So I can imagine, something coming at you 105, 106 miles per hour made out of that, and yeah, it would definitely hurt. And to think, most hockey players back in the day used to play with no helmets, and even goalies used to play with no masks on, no helmets, no mask. So you can imagine that was probably a lot more unsafe back at that era than it is now. But a lot of sports are like that. Back in the old era, they were a lot more. There wasn't as much safety as there is now, and you wonder. Well, those guys they didn't get hurt as much. I mean, I'm sure they still got hurt, but they didn't get hurt as much. Most of them were pretty tough guys anyway. I mean, because I've seen a hockey player actually. A couple of years ago, he was actually on the sideline. One of his teeth got knocked loose, and he pulled the tooth right out, and he was ready to go the next shift whenever he got back up. And that's something most of us people can't say that we could do. I know I certainly can pull my own tooth out and go on about it. I mean, that would be, and I mean, it's not like it was a baby tooth. It was a full-grown adult tooth that he pulls out. I don't care if it's loose or not, that's going to hurt. Also in the All-Star game, the Atlantic beat the Pacific, the Atlantic beat the Metro, and the Pacific beat the Central, and then the Pacific beat the Atlantic in the championship game. Good thing for the Pacific. I think the team that was most stacked was the Metro, and they didn't beat the Atlantic, and that was kind of a shock. The Pacific beat the Central, who it's usually a good game. It's usually kind of close, but usually the Pacific pulls it out, and the Pacific playing the Atlantic, and in my honest opinion, the Pacific would be the better team anyway. So they win the All-Star championship there. In other news, Kobe Bryant passes away at 41. He was in a helicopter crash. I think the total number of people on board were 9. I think that passed away. I don't know the official count. There may have been more. But Kobe Bryant passes away. He's a 5-time NBA champion. Definitely one of the greatest. Came straight out of high school, straight to the NBA. And compared to, in many people's minds, he was comparable to Jordan. He even said himself he wished he would have won a 6th title like Jordan, but 5 is nothing to sneeze at. You guys will have to excuse me a little bit. I've had a runny nose for a little while. I'm trying to do the best I can do with it, and we'll see how that pans out. And it's just running like a leaky faucet, so we will work on that. Let's see, in other news. The Dodgers fans think they should get the World Series trophies because Houston cheated. Here's what I got to say to Dodgers fans about that. Yeah, you got cheated. But here's the thing. If we give you the World Series titles, we got to give back some of the New England Super Bowls. We got to give back some of the NFC, AFC championship games over the years. We got to go back and give back some of the Stanley Cup wins, and we got to go back and give back some of these NBA games and stuff like that. Listen, it happens. It happens. Sorry to say, and it does suck when it happens. But I tell you, like I tell Saints fans in football, you're not the only team that's getting gypped by the refs. There's other teams that get gypped by the refs. Sometimes the calls are really blatant and people miss them. I don't know why they miss them. I have no explanation for that, but it happens. People miss stuff. And then later on they say, oh, well, we missed a call. Well, it cost that team the game. It cost that team the game, and it would be a playoff game, and, you know, there's no way to go back and fix it. Or at least they tell us there's no way to go back and fix it. There's ways that they could go back and fix it, but just too much shenanigans to ensue, and we don't need to start doing all that. They need to, as they move forward, they need to fix things and make sure that things are in place to prevent other problems from happening. That way you don't have these same issues all the time. NXT had a pay-per-view. I was not aware of that. And the Imperium defeated the Undisputed Era. That was the big thing that happened. A lot of the other matches weren't as interesting, but Imperium did defeat the Undisputed Era. I was kind of shocked because as of late, the Undisputed Era had the tag titles, the world title. They lost the North American title, but they still lost the match, and that was kind of a surprise because they're riding on that high wave and they lost the match. The Pro Bowl, the AFC defeats the NFC. I'm not really shocked at this. It usually happens. Didn't really watch too much of the Pro Bowl. 2 turnovers late in the game killed the NFC. That's Kirk Cousins. Fumbled the ball. That was returned for a touchdown, and he threw an interception that led to a drive for a touchdown. Again, I don't know who votes Cousins into the Pro Bowl, but he does not need to go. Cousins, even in Washington, and I can say this as a Washington fan, he is now with my dad's favorite team, the Vikings. Dad knows as well as I do that if he makes one mistake in the game, that's it for the rest of the game. He is not going to get any better, and they are going to lose. He did it in Washington. He does it in Minnesota. He did win a playoff game this year, but that's as far as he got. So, Cousins is going to be one of those that he's not as good as what people think he is. That's why Minnesota got him, because they thought he was going to be good. I mean, my team is garbage, but I would rather be a team that's not very good than a team that thinks they're very good and a quarterback that thinks he's spectacular and he's really shown nobody anything. And like I said, his MO is if he starts doing bad in a game, he blows it. He just like steadily gets worse as the game goes along. In the Royal Rumble, Andrade retains the U.S. title against Humberto Carrillo. That's what we'll say it is, or Carrillo. Roman Reigns defeated Baron Corbin in a Falls Count Anywhere match. I think he pinned him on the top of the dugout at Minute Maid Park. Charlotte Flair wins the Women's Royal Rumble. No real shock there. We don't know who she's going to face yet because she's either going to face Bayley or Becky Lynch. The problem with that is she's already faced Becky Lynch 100 times. But unless they make her a face, she can't face Bayley because Bayley's a heel at the moment. And that's heel versus heel usually doesn't work out very good. So Becky Lynch is more of a face. So they'll probably make Charlotte a heel here before too long, which suits her personality anyway. She's better as a heel. She's like her dad. She was better as a heel than as a fan favorite. So we'll see if they do anything. She's kind of in the middle right at the moment of going either way. In the Women's Royal Rumble, Mighty Molly, Kelly Kelly, and Beth Phoenix showed up in the match. And none of them win. I don't think Kelly Kelly lasted too long. I don't think Mighty Molly lasted very long either. Beth Phoenix was about the only one that lasted pretty long. Last two in the ring were Shayna Baszler and from NXT and Charlotte Flair, and I was just kind of like, I don't want to see either of them win because I just didn't want to see a match with either champion, with either of those two, and I was just like, well, somebody's got to win, so I don't know. So, Bayley retained her championship over Lacey Evans. Bray Wyatt retained the title over Daniel Bryan in a leather strap match. And I watched some of the highlights of the leather strap match, and it was pretty, it was what you would expect. It was a beating with a leather strap most of the match, and it looked to be pretty rough in certain spots. I'm sure they sold it pretty well, maybe, but yeah, there were spots where you thought maybe Bryan was going to pull out the win, but I think they just made it to where to make the match interesting, and you know, you kind of figured Wyatt was going to win. I mean, I guess they tried to show that maybe Bryan would win, but in the end, Wyatt, or as he calls himself now, the Fiend. I can't get used to the Fiend. That's what he calls himself now, and he dresses up in that really weird getup. But I guess it's working to a point. But they're going to have to take the belt off of him sometime soon because he's starting to look, for better words, superhuman and like unbeatable, and that gets real stale real fast to fans because that's not what we want to see. Becky Lynch retained her title against Asuka by submission, and Drew McIntyre wins the Men's Royal Rumble. This was kind of a shock, the Drew McIntyre, and he said that he wanted to face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. He's actually the one that eliminated Brock Lesnar. It took 4 other people to get Brock Lesnar off his game to eliminate him from the Rumble, and but McIntyre was kind of a wild card to win this thing. One note that I want to add is Naomi in the Women's Royal Rumble. She pulled a Kofi Kingston. Kofi has a knack for staying in the Rumble. He didn't do it this year, but he has a knack of just weird things happening to keep himself in the Rumble. Naomi did it this year. She came back and she was thrown out, and her feet almost hit the ground. She kind of Spider-Man against the barrier outside. She climbed against the barrier. She went back over to the announcer's desk, got the board off of the announcer's desk, put it in the middle of between that and the stairs, and got back up through there and back in the ring. And so we didn't see it from Kofi, but we saw somebody else do it this time. MVP and Edge entered in the Men's Royal Rumble. We haven't seen MVP for a long time. I mean, in any organization, we haven't seen him in a long time. Edge coming back from neck injuries, thought he was retired. He shows up, and it's nice to see Edge back. Nice to see MVP back, even though he did lose on Monday night to Rey Mysterio. I don't think they're gonna do much with MVP, which is kind of bad because I thought when he was there, I thought he did pretty good as a heel. I thought he was a pretty good wrestler, and I thought he was just never really given a chance, kind of like Mr. Kennedy, if anybody remembers him. Well, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Anderson, whatever you know him by. Of course, was in Impact Wrestling, and they utilized him a little bit better. It's the same way with MVP. They utilized him in Impact Wrestling a tad bit better. Houston Texans coach Bill O'Brien, he was named the GM of the Houston Texans. So he goes from being the coach to the GM. Let's see. On Raw, not much else to say, but McIntyre, after he did say that he was going to face Lesnar, he faced Gallows and Anderson, which is the OC. He beat him in a handicap match. This is very strange because they are known as the greatest tag team in the world. They won a match, and we're the greatest tag team in the world. I haven't seen much from them. I didn't like them when they came in to begin with, and I don't know what they were planning to do with them. They stuck them with AJ Styles, and AJ had a lot of hype coming into the company, and then just kind of after a while, just downward spiral. I guess the staleness, and I guess they thought this was going to catch on, and it never has with the fans. They just don't really care. Gallows, I think this is his third attempt at the WWE. He was Festus at one point of the tag team, Jesse and Festus. That was a terrible gimmick. He was something else, but I can't remember what it was. And in Impact, he was with the Aces and Eights in that storyline. And oh gosh, that just went a lot longer than it really needed to, and it almost ended up being like the New World Order in the WCW. It was awful and should not have went that long. Andrade defends his title against Humberto Carrillo again for the second night in a row. I'm not real sure why we had the same match we had the night before. Only this time it ended a little differently. Zelina Vega, who is Andrade's manager, valet, whichever one you want to call her, he's getting pinned by Humberto, and she moonsaults off of the top rope and breaks up the pin, which the moonsault was fine. That's fine. She shows that she can do that. That's good. But it needs to be saved for like a women's match that she can fight in. However, Carrillo goes off the deep end. I don't know if they're going to try and make him a heel. He goes off the deep end, and he ends up pretty much assaulting Andrade after the match, runs him into the steel stairs, and DDTs him on the concrete floor. So, we will see how that ends up, or which direction they choose to go with that. That was unexpected, really, but we'll see if they work with that. And the last thing, Edge returns at the end of the show. Orton comes out, congratulates him, talks for a minute, and then just hits him with the RKO. I don't know. He hits him with the RKO, and then he taunts it like he's going to break his neck with the chair. And then he does the old concerto thing where you have the chair laying underneath the head and the chair over top of the head. This is something that Edge and Christian used to do back when they were a tag team, and it's called a concerto, and that's what they used to use. You take the top chair and you smash like sandwich in between the two chairs. Edge kind of lays there motionless, and I'm assuming he's okay, but you never know. He sold it pretty good, so they made it look pretty believable. I doubt he's injured. We'll see how this storyline plays out. It looks like Orton's going to be the heel. Edge is going to be the face. Maybe Edge is going to come back and wrestle a little bit. He said he's had the neck surgeries. He said he feels better. Feels like maybe he can wrestle again. And he's went through rehab and things like that. So he says that he feels like he's ready to compete. So we'll see how much of a role that plays a little bit later on. We haven't seen him for a long time wrestling anyway. I mean, we've seen him on other stuff, but not wrestling. Another thing, in case anybody wanted to know what was on my shirt, this is Handsome Jack off of the Borderlands. My cousin Jim, shout out to him, got me 2 shirts for Christmas. One of them is this one, which is Handsome Jack. The other one is Claptrap, which is a little robot that I'll have to wear on here sometime. I like these shirts. They're really lightweight and they're really nicely done. He gets me these shirts that are kind of thinner. They're not real heavy, and they're pretty thin. I've got some other ones, and I really like my shirts because they're pretty thin, and I can wear another shirt over top of them if I get cool. But most of the time they're pretty good. They're lightweight, and I like them. I like the shirts. So, that's going to about do it for tonight. This Sunday is the Super Bowl, so we'll be going over that. I don't think anybody's got any pay-per-views or anything. I am going to started it the other night. I'm going to start doing maybe a Final Fantasy, maybe 1 stream to begin with. This is the Game Boy Advance version. It's the Dawn of Souls one that has like the 4 extra dungeons. A lot of it, the most stuff I'm going to do is the big stuff. I'm not going to do, I'm not going to show me buying this and this and this and this and kind of leveling up and things like that. So what I'm going to do is from stream to stream, at the start of like the next stream, I'm going to show you where, I got to Provoca, I think was the name of the place. I'm going to show where the armor and weapon shops are and the magic shops, and I'm going to show what I have, armor and spell and stuff wise like that. That way people can use this. If you really want to get into the game, I usually use a warrior, a ninja, a warrior, a thief, a white and black mage. Jim has actually beaten the game with 4 monks, which has no magic whatsoever. So if you want to see him do that, he might do it again. I don't know. He may stream it if he thinks maybe he could do it again. He has done it though. I have seen it. He has done it. It is interesting to watch. So the way I play it might not be the way everybody else plays it. I'm just giving you one option. So, but be on the lookout for that. Friday Night Fisticuffs. I think I'm going to do a Super Nintendo game. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe Rival Turf. And I think the other game, it's going to be something from the arcade probably. Maybe something from an arcade, from one of the arcade games. Let you know on Friday morning. Try to get that to everybody, and we'll see what it's going to be. But I think for sure, we're going to try to do Rival Turf for sure. I haven't played it for a long time though, so I need to try to figure out where I'm supposed to go and everything. So that'll do it for tonight. Again, like, subscribe if you want to on all this stuff. I mean, we do these videos, comment, whatever you want to do, and we'll see you next week.